abstract concepts Jeremy considered expounding on today: the history and relevance of etiquette, the effects of religious canon on history, the construction of a life insurance policy. Yeah, thrilling. Offensive line blocking schemes in football. And finally, the structure of Toastmasters International beyond the club level. If you'd like to discuss any of these with Jeremy, see him after the meeting. Today, his topic will be one of the topics he knows best, but feels most people don't understand at all. Please welcome Jeremy Udell.
Complete this phrase. The only certainties in life are... That's correct. Fellow articulators, Mr. Toastmaster, honored guests, you are blessed today to get to hear me talk about a concept that combines both of these into one, the estate tax. Yes, this is an issue you should care about, because in the gasconade leading up to the election, this will be an issue you hear discussed. Yes, there is a large increase in this tax coming next year if nothing is done. And a lot of people have posited that politicians on both sides of the aisle have dragged their feet on this issue so that they have it to debate leading up to November. So be aware of it. So let's learn a little bit about it so we understand what they're talking about. The IRS defines the estate tax as a tax on your right to transfer property at death. A tax at death. The tax is also known as the inheritance tax and the death tax. How does it work? Well, I'm going to use an illustration, and I'm going to use some money that's going to need to be, I'm going to hand some to Reed here in a second. And let's talk about the tax. Let's assume you have $20 million. Why 20 million? Why such a big number? Because really it's only for the very wealthy this tax applies to, at least right now. Let's talk about what that means. Assume this $20 I'm holding in my hand is 20 million. And let's assume a husband and wife both pass away and want to leave all of it to their children. In today's dollars, the government allows them to exempt from the tax up to $5 million each. So this $10 bill right here is exempt under current law. The rest of it would be taxed at about 35%. So about $3 is going to go into my jar of the IRS, represented by a Martha Stewart collection jar. Appropriate, right? Martha Stewart, IRS, Waka Waka. So $3, and let's go ahead and add my 50 cents in there. Went to that of 20 million. It's a lot of money to most of us, but on a $20 million estate, it's not huge. Next year, if nothing is done, the estate tax law reverts back to the old law. On that same $20 million estate, only $2 is exempt from estate tax. So $2 million on a $20 million estate has no estate tax on it. The rest of it has not a 35% rate, but a 55% rate.
Ouch.
This amounts to $9.9 million, effectively at $10 of that 20 is now going to Martha Stewart. I should say the IRS. This is a big tax. Something probably does need to be done on that. 20 million's a lot of money. 2 billion in today's dollars is still a lot of money. But it's not so much money that people are exempt. Let's talk about who it could affect under both current law and under next year's law. Anyone here ever heard of Secretariat?
Oh, yeah.
Many of you probably even saw the movie.
Yep.
But for those who didn't, and for those who didn't really care about this part of the movie, part of the major struggle was there was an estate tax due for the lady who owned Secretariat. Her father had passed away and left them the farm, and he hadn't done any planning, so a big tax bill was due. And it looked like she was going to have to sell Secretariat before he ran his famous Triple Crown race that now people think he's the greatest horse in history. She would have had to sell this horse. Now, she did some creative thinking and got out of there. But what about most people? Most people don't have a Triple Crown horse to sell options in like she did. Let's take the case of my mother-in-law. My mother-in-law's parents left her a house, a little bit of cash. This was under the old tax law and a much lower exemption even than $1 million. And she had an estate tax due on that estate. Her choices came down to whether or not to sell the house and still have to give up some cash or give up a lot bigger piece of the cash. It's very tough on her. And it really hurt her. She feels very strongly this tax should be repealed now. It does seem a little unfair, this tax, doesn't it? So why do we need it? Well, it's a tax, first and foremost, so it's going to raise some revenues for the government. So it is theoretically keeping your income tax a little lower. Theoretically. It also allows you to avoid certain events that have been referred to by billionaires. Billionaires think this tax should be in place. Why? Warren Buffett and Bill Gates have come out and said the estate tax repeal would destroy the country. Specifically, Warren Buffett's comment was it would create a dynastic plutocracy, destroy our democracy. What does that mean, a dynastic plutocracy? It means these people. It means aristocrats, an aristocracy. In England, in France, when you could leave money that you compiled over your lifetime to your heirs, and they could compile more over their lifetime, and they could compile more over their lifetime, eventually, you could leave so much money that the person didn't even really need to work anymore, and they would still have gobs of power. They would still be able to buy politicians as much as they wanted, and those politicians would legislate to keep them in power. Doesn't seem very fair either, does it? Now, that hasn't happened yet, but the first billionaire to pass away in this country was the Rockefellers, and it was the second that happened that the government said, there's a problem here. We need to make sure we have enough taxes in place so that the Rockefeller family doesn't eventually dominate this country to such a degree that they effectively run it forever. But do you really think that Warren Buffett and Bill Gates are going to pay any estate tax? Thomas doesn't. He's shaking his head no. He's a CPA and he knows that there are ways to avoid this tax. Let's talk about them. First of all, you can spend all your money. If you don't have any money left, they can't tax it, or at least spend it down to the exemption level, whatever that is today or tomorrow. If you do that, you won't have an estate tax. You can leave it all to your spouse. Of course, that only works for the one time, because if they leave it all to their next spouse, your kids aren't going to be too happy with all the money leaving the family. So let's leave that aside for now and talk about leaving it all to charity. Just like exempting your income tax from charity if you give it, if you leave all your estate to charity, it's exempt from estate tax. And you can leave all of your exemption to your heirs, that right now full $10 million, all of that to your heirs, and everything beyond that can go to charity, and it's all tax-free. That's another way to avoid the tax. And one last way is to do some advanced estate planning. Yes, if my parents, my mother-in-law's parents, I should say, had done some estate planning, she probably wouldn't have had the issue she had. If Secretariat's owners had done some estate planning, probably wouldn't have had the issue. Now, is it fair to require these people to do estate planning just to avoid the estate tax? I'll leave that for you to decide. My 2 cents, which is right here, is that I'm glad we have the estate tax. Mr. Toastmaster.